I'll now kick off today's session. Good morning and welcome. I'm Sean De Bruin. I'm the CEO of the Tourism Industry Council here in South Australia, for those of you that I don't know. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 19th In Conversation session series, which we began at the beginning of COVID. This program we undertake every fortnight. It's about keeping the tourism industry and stakeholders engaged and informed as we make our way through this crisis and into recovery. There'll be many people that will watch this recording afterwards, so I should also welcome you all and let you know that this recording was undertaken Wednesday the 7th of October. Before I introduce our speaker and guest, just have a few housekeeping items. Firstly, please keep your microphone on mute, and there will be an opportunity at the end of the session to come off mute and ask questions. In the interim, we very much encourage you to use the chat function. It's a great way to post your comments and questions as we go through the session. And obviously, as I previously said, we will be recording today's session so that people, and many people choose this option, can watch it afterwards and receive the benefit of the information that's provided. So that's enough from me. It's now my pleasure to welcome our guest and also to just briefly say the purpose of today's session is to gain a better understanding about Festivals Adelaide, its role, its purpose, the work that it does, and also about how industry and stakeholders, all of us, can work and collaborate better for a better outcome across the state for tourism and festivals and events. I'd now like to hand over to our guest, Justyna Jochym, who took on the role, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justyna, earlier this year in February. It's been a role that's been around for quite a few years. Justyna brings an energy and enthusiasm which is absolutely fantastic for our industry. She's very committed to engaging not just in festivals and events, but across the tourism sector. She has a very strategic and well-considered approach, and we're delighted to have you speak with us today. Over to you, Justyna.
Thank you so much, Sean. Just bear with me while I get the presentation up. Now, hopefully everyone can see the title slide. Good morning to all, and thank you so much for having me as part of this In Conversation series. As Sean said, my name is Justyna Jochym, and I am the CEO of Festivals Adelaide. Now, I thought I would start off by sharing with you the vision of Festivals Adelaide, which is for Adelaide's festivals to exemplify the ambition, identity, and prosperity of Adelaide and South Australia. Essentially, we believe that festivals reflect the best and most optimistic version of a place. And how does this translate into what we do on a practical level? Well, we strategically position, develop, and advance the festival sector. We work in that meta space to enhance the public benefits of the festivals and to ensure that we're fostering future growth of the city of Adelaide and South Australia. And specifically, our work revolves around 5 key pillars, which is that of advancing evidence and research about the festivals, their role in development, as well as the opportunities and challenges that sometimes are encountered in the sector. We work around the area of strategic thinking, planning, and development, which I will touch on a little bit in further slides. We work around storytelling and marketing of the festival city and the festival state. We seek to establish strong collaboration and ensure that we are positioning ourselves not only locally, but also nationally and globally as a world-leading festival city and festival state. And we work to make certain that the brand of Festival City and State, it has sustainability and efficacy. So we pull together resources for common goals and objectives. A bit of background about Festivals Adelaide. We were established in 2011. We are currently made up of 11 of the major arts and cultural festivals, and you see the list of the full membership below. It is important to note that we do focus on arts and culture, so under our umbrella, we don't have other festivals that perhaps work in other domains, such as gastronomy or wine or nature-based tourism. So the focus is on arts and culture and the value that this sector brings to the festivals and tourism more broadly. So this is a membership-based alliance. And I suppose in the context of today's conversation, it is important to point out that we do identify as filling a very specific, significant role in the space of cultural tourism. And I wanted just to draw your attention to two reports that the Australia Council for the Arts published in 2018 on the subject, one on international arts and domestic arts tourism. We know from this report that inbound tourists spend around $1,300 more on average than other tourists. We also know that domestic arts tourists paint a similar picture for us. The spend around there is about $400 greater, and domestic arts tourists stay longer. So there is a very specific, strong case for why cultural tourism and arts tourism should be an area of development and strategic focus. We also have seen that arts tourism has increased in terms of spending since 2013 by 55%. So again, very strong figures. And in fact, Matthew Westwood recently published an article for The Australian titled "Cultural Tourism May Get the Recognition It Deserves in a Post-COVID Landscape," which we are crossing our fingers it actually really and truly does. It is a significant component of the $146 billion tourism industry here in Australia. And while different studies point to different figures, we know that roughly half of all international visitors experience some of Australia's arts and cultural attractions. And so we are here to ensure that festivals are, again, a crucial component and player in that development. And so to paint a picture about festivals and tourism in South Australia, we generate an economic impact of 116 million of new income to the state, with a total expenditure of 380 roughly. We also see that nearly 400,000 visitor nights are created, and we contributed to the creation of 1,000 and nearly 90 full-time equivalent jobs. It's just like cultural tourism in Australia in general, we are seeing an increase in terms of our impact. In the past year, in 2019 to 2020, we've seen a 7% increase in the stimulus to incomes and jobs, 7% increase in issued tickets, 39% increase in visitor nights, 21% increase in total attendances, both ticketed and free, and a 10% increase in total expenditure. So again, the trend of cultural tourism being on the up and up is also something that we see mirrored in the festival tourism space. But of course, this is perhaps made more difficult with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Festivals and events were among the first to be shut down and will most likely be the last to come back up in light of the restrictions and regulations that are necessary to keep us all safe. But some key reflections that I wanted to share with you from the Festivals Adelaide space that we have been thinking about. Certainly, there is going to be a dramatic reduction in international participant presence in Adelaide and South Australia at the festivals due to our borders being closed or restricted. There's going to be a substantially reduced interstate and international audience. There are question marks over audience appetite to attend mass live events as well. So these are all factors that we will be seeing reflected in subsequent years and iterations of festivals. Even if audience appetite and interest will be there, we there is the very valid question of what will entertainment expenditure look like, and will it be discretionary? There is a significant move into the online space, which means quite intense global competition for participant and audiences. Hybrid online events will be new pillars of our experiences, as well as an increase in outdoor festival planning and experience development. But this also means that a lot of festival cities around the world are going to be shifting into these spaces. And so the question becomes, how does Adelaide and South Australia maintain its world leading status in that respect? There's very deep concern about artists and their livelihoods, as well as the broader value chain across hospitality, accommodation, transport, the audiovisual sector. There are several initiatives that are tracking the overwhelming impact on the events and festival space. Two of them to mention is I Lost My Gig, which has, as of the 27th of April of this year, seen $340 million worth of cancellations and postponements being recorded across Australia and New Zealand, and that is the impact that is being felt by the creative industries. There's also the We Make Events movement, which aims to draw attention to the red alert that the events industry is on and the live events sector is on, and especially for those working in this industry. So we will see, again, density training, regulations and restrictions really bring a focus to reimagining performances in new spaces. And as I mentioned, this is something that will affect numerous years to come, most likely. Adelaide, it is important to note, is a founding member of the International Festival Cities Network, which includes Edinburgh, Montreal, Singapore, and Krakow in Poland. And there's wide consensus that a dual lens is really necessary to approach the question of resiliency of the sector in years to come. So not only are we questioning what it will mean to run events in 2021, but also well beyond, what will it mean to adapt and reimagine the global festival circuit and an industry. But there are some opportunities we also identify, and that namely includes the question of innovation and how we'll sustain and strengthen programs and eventually lead to better quality organizations and products and services that the festivals offer, and by extension that they offer to tourists and visitors that come to Adelaide and South Australia. We will see a necessary increase in creative development opportunities across the city and state to ensure that Adelaide is a globally recognized destination, not only for visitors, but also for people looking to develop a creative career. And we have been very optimistic about the recent announcement from the Department of Premier and Cabinet about the $10.2 million arts funding package that will help to ensure that we have the funding necessary to drive this creative development that will distinguish Adelaide in years to come. We are also discussing, and quite thoroughly, ongoingly, how festivals improve the lives of citizens and communities through engagement in them, and how we create a shared understanding of promotion of creative citizenship across South Australia. So perhaps the connection to draw here is to nature-based tourism. We want to build a sense of belonging to nature, to identify with the natural landscapes of South Australia. Equally, we want to develop a sense of creative citizenship so that we can promote the arts and creativity of South Australia to visitors and tourists alike through our own engagement with it. And we've really come to this conception of festivals as the connective tissues of our communities and societies, as facilitators of these invisible bridges between a variety of adjacent sectors, and really drivers of the sense of belonging. And also curators of experiences for visitors and tourists to make it easy for them to access what makes it so special to be creating and making in South Australia. So in the context of tourism, we are really questioning what will long-term, deep, engaged, integrated tourism look like subsequent to COVID-19, and what role will festivals play in that? We hope it will be characterized by interdisciplinarity, integration between the sectors, sustainable development, as well as social advancement of the impact of festival tourism, not only on the people who come here and then take those experiences away, but also the people who live and stay here. So I just wanted to finish off by addressing some of the opportunities that we see moving forward. As I mentioned, cultural tourism is not only a trend but an integral part of the entire industry that perhaps in our perception has not been embraced as fully as it could be. And so whether we call it experiential tourism or cultural tourism or arts tourism, we do see a lot of space and an opportunity here for South Australia and the City of Adelaide to really capitalize on this moment, to think about an integrated and an unsiloed tactical approach to cultural tourism. We see that connected to research and development incentives that could really help us to innovate and create new opportunities for artists and the adjacent sectors that work so closely with the festivals. And then that would lead to, hopefully, very specific and tactical destination development mechanisms so that businesses, communities can benefit from the presence of festivals as much as possible. We simply need a very integrated approach to this question. So Festivals Adelaide, as an alliance of the 11 major arts and cultural festivals in South Australia, really aims to drive that conversation, to bring people to the table about it, and to articulate a path forward with relevant stakeholders and partners. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of what Festivals Adelaide does and how we're thinking about our relationship to the tourism sector. So thank you very much, and happy to take questions now, Sean.
Thanks, Justyna. That's great. That's a fantastic overview. I've got some questions that we had a lot of people put questions in as part of the registration process. So I'll just go through those first, and then I'll open the floor for people to come off mic and ask their questions. And I've sort of pulled some of these together based on what people have written. So Justyna, I've got 6, so I'll kick off with the first one. Regions are obviously a fundamental part of our tourism offering here in South Australia. You can't have a great trip to our state without going into the regions, arguably. And we know from research that people that do both a city and a regional experience have the best visits. How does Festival Adelaide see this opportunity with regions? Obviously, your members and your focus is around the city, but you also acknowledge with the festival state. How does regions play a role with the work that you're doing?
Well, I think it really brings to question how well connected our planning is and how tactical our approach is. Festivals can be very significant draw cards to the City of Adelaide, but then it is a question of how do we jointly approach directing and steering and facilitating people's experiences in the region. So I would suppose answer this question in a two-way method. Firstly, I think we need to have a very deep conversation about how cultural tourism is between the City of Adelaide and the regions is tied, and develop long-term thinking so that we're not just approaching it in a myopic way, not only approaching it in terms of building product and then driving people from product to product to product, but really how do we shape an experience of the city and region, and how do festivals help to drive tourists from one area of the state to another. And the second sort of lens that I would take on it is that our festivals are working increasingly in the regions, and there are some great examples of this happening. But I do think that there is a component of destination development that needs to take place, and we need to be really mindful about how do we help businesses and communities understand the benefits of having festivals and events take place in a given location. So essentially, how can festivals help businesses and communities meet their objectives? I think is the approach to take. But we do need to develop a consistent approach around this, and we need stakeholders around the table to really drive this conversation forward. So I suppose in summation, I think this is a really big and important question, and one of the real differentiating factors of South Australia is that you can have this really engaged, integrated, and long-term, meaningful experience here.
Thanks, Justyna. So there's a follow-on question. Someone raised a point around nature-based tourism, and you acknowledged it in your presentation that, and we've seen that the government is really focused on growing nature-based tourism through Parks 2025, the Nature-Based Tourism Co-Investment Fund, and it's a Forestry SA question that places like Kaipo and Mount Crawford, can they play a role in how we deliver our festivals and events across the state? How do you see places like that, Justyna? Probably it's quite crosses over with your earlier answer, but wonder if you can further comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, because of the COVID restrictions, a lot of festivals and events are going to be looking for outdoor and unique settings to create these festival experiences, and so it's certainly not out of the question that the festivals would be using our natural resources and natural landscape for this purpose. So I don't know of any specific plans to develop festival experiences in these particular spaces, but certainly outdoor settings are going to become more and more important for the festival context. And we have already seen City of Adelaide and other government stakeholders becoming being extremely generous with the space that we have available to us and that we can take advantage of in planning our festivals and events. So I think watch this space.
Thanks, Justyna. So and you touched on it again earlier in your presentation. So development of local talent. Emma Knights has also put up a question here in the chat, supporting local artists. Obviously, Festivals Adelaide has a broader umbrella role across many events. How does Festival Adelaide see this issue? And obviously it's not for you to comment on individual events, but broadly this challenge of local talent and bringing the next generation through.
Well, it's a really integral part of the conversation about what makes a sustainable festival city. And there is, as I mentioned, very deep concern about the impacts of COVID-19 on artists, creators, event producers, production companies, small to medium businesses. We really do need a robust and healthy ecosystem in order for festivals to thrive, in order for museums to thrive, and in order for that entire cultural tourism space to continue to be an attractor of visitors and tourists to the city and state, but also as that connective tissue, as I mentioned, for communities and socially for us to all benefit from. So it is a very deep concern, but we are very positively sort of optimistic about the recent support that SA government has put out to the arts sector, and hopefully as many artists and companies can benefit from the resources out there as possible. And we absolutely advocate for the continued support of independent artists, of small to medium businesses, because as I say, if we don't have a healthy and robust tier there, then it's going to be difficult to continue to proclaim the sustainability of a festival city.
Thanks, Justyna. I've got two questions here that are related, and again, you've touched on this previously. So it's about festivals and events and what they look like into the future. You've talked about how there'll be potentially more outdoor activities. So I guess the question is, what does our festivals and events program look like for 2021 in terms of the way the events are carried out, and event safety? What are some of the ways in which different events or Festivals Adelaide is looking at the event safety piece, because consumer confidence is obviously critically important as we move into recovery.
Absolutely. Consumer confidence is a really crucial factor. And I think the response to that from the Festivals Adelaide membership is to ensure that there's consistency in sort of the rules and approaches to safety. Of course, we are bound by the COVID-19 management plans and are following the advice of SA Health and government regulations very closely. We're also working with the Australian Festivals Association and the Live Events Industry Forum, which have put out very extensive guidelines around the subject. So the festivals are approaching this in as much of a consistent and transparent way possible, because we really feel that approach is going to really help the public feel confident about attending and coming back to live events and performance. Now, the festivals, especially for next year, of course, we're in the midst of final preparations before the launch of the Adelaide Film Festival. We have the Feast Festival coming up still this year, and those programs have been announced, and we are still awaiting for the final shape of the 2021 festivals to become public. But it does seem that the trend for festivals worldwide will be to have online, hybrid, and outdoor components. It is just not something that we will be able to get away from, and so that brings a lot of innovation and creative thinking along with it. So I think we can be certain that the festivals will not let us down in terms of that innovation and creativity.
One of the last one that I've got in terms of what came through earlier from people, Justyna, is, and it's a good one, how can TIC SA members help you in your role? How can individual tourism businesses help you and your organisation deliver the aspirations?
Well, as I was saying previously, I think there is perhaps an identified disconnect between cultural tourism and tourism strategies more broadly. And I think we can all help each other by maintaining broader communication around the topic, really helping each other to understand how we can drive benefits from the festivals and events space, and what are the needs of other sectors and other regions that we don't necessarily work so closely with. So I think this organization really allows us to have those conversations in a more fruitful manner, and conversations that really point to specific objectives that we can try to collectively work towards meeting. So the broader, the more honest, the more communicative that the membership is with our industry, I think the better for us to understand what its needs are and how we can help.
Great. On the chat, we've got Mariana's asked a question. I don't know if you can see it there, Justyna. Does Adelaide Festival or other stakeholders have a strategy about e-festivals or technology in festivals? There's an emerging trend. You've touched on that with hybrid events and things like that. Can you talk a little bit more to the strategic thinking there?
Well, I can't speak to any particular festival, but I absolutely agree, Mariana. It's a trend that's here to stay. It is interesting, sort of observing the various approaches taken by global festival cities, and the appetite from audiences for e-festivals. and their attendance at them. So I think we're at the stage of, because Adelaide in South Australia has been considerably lucky in terms of our COVID-19 response and the situation that we find ourselves in here. We may be leaning more towards the live events space than other cities and countries that have been completely shut down and for months and months have not been able to do anything in person. But there are certainly strategies that are taking shape, and we're in discussions with leaders in this field, especially because we do see a lot of similarities as well with the business conferencing and Congress sector, which is also innovating in the space. So there's a dialogue between the two around what could be adapted for the festival sector here.
Great. Justyna, I'll throw open now to the floor. In doing that, Paul Reeves, can I put you on the spot? I can see you there, and obviously you delivered Beta Birdwood 9 or 10 days ago as part of the History Trust of South Australia's event program. Just wondering if you've got any learnings or any comments, Paul, based on your experience with the Beta Birdwood most recently. Please come off mute. You're still on mute, Paul. Can you come off mute? I don't know if we can do it this end. There we are. Got you.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Sean. Yeah. Look, the learnings are coming thick and fast. I think the essence that we found the essence is a good word. What we found was we went back to the core. We stripped back all of the things that had been added on over the 40 odd years, it felt like. We asked ourselves the question, well, we were celebrating our 40th anniversary, so from 1980. So we did ask ourselves the question, what did this event look like back in 1980? Did it have the dancing? Did it have the stage? Did it have the performers? Did it have all the additional food trucks and the army and all this sort of, all the additional things? And we slowly took it. What we wanted to do was present an event that still had the essence of it, at its core, but we took that opportunity. A lot of people have said, you know, that the hardest thing in business is to stop doing something, and what you do as you roll along over 40 years, you collect ideas and you collect things, and then you never stop doing them, even when they're not quite working either. So it was a good opportunity to strip it back. So that's our big. There's loads of other learnings, Sean, that we're gathering all that data. I think we're only just coming out of a bit of a recovery mode physically. Everybody. Is only 10 days ago, but I think that's the main one. Is we took it back to what is its essence, what is its most simplest form, and we delivered that. And what we found was there were a couple of elements that we needed, which was, you know, okay, it's called the Beta Birdwood. It's a drive, it's a showcase of vehicles, and the other things that have been added on over the years that were the problems for us with delivering in COVID were not necessary. One of the other things that we did learn, though, and this is, I guess, and I think we've probably got a room full of operational junkies anyway, is that we put our COVID management plan to SA Health. It would have been about 9 weeks before the event, and it took us, and with no complaint at all, because they were very good questions. It took us another 3 weeks back and forth with SA Health before we actually landed on it. Once we landed, that was the way we were going to deliver it. But in the 6 to 7 weeks between that point, things did shift. So we had a few a few things that jarred for our customers, our participants, where they said, well, why are you making us do this when we don't need to do that anymore? But we had no way of actually adjusting what we said we would do in 7 weeks before. So, and I think it's the speed of change that we're all adapting to that sometimes overtakes the planning. So that was we're going, oh, we don't really need to do this now, but we haven't got the time to go back to SA Health and get another approval of a change.
Yeah, great comments, Paul. Justyna, can I throw back to you? I think the two insights there, Paul. One is, go back to core business, and two is interactions with SA Health and the day-by-day changes that we're seeing require ongoing focus and energy to make sure that they allow you to deliver what you need to for your customers. Justyna, do you have any comments on those points?
Well, similarly to Paul, we've had wonderful interactions with SA Health, and that they are posing very insightful and thorough, meaningful questions about the events that we are planning and our approach to maintaining COVID safety. So it does take time. Everything is changing very quickly. Our conversations, which started a few months ago, a lot of them no longer apply, especially when we are planning for the peak festival season in March and beyond. So it is that's why that proximity to various organizations and institutions is really important, so that conversation is maintained as consistently as possible, so that back and forth can be as easy as possible. It's not something that we will be able to jump over. It is just something that we'll have to go through and consistently negotiate the changes over. That's the reality. But it's great to hear your experience, Paul. I think a lot of the festivals are equally going through a similar process, and that's why I spoke of that reflection of festivals as the connective tissue. What is our essence? What is our purpose at our core? What is our core business? Our core business is to bring people together and to drive value and positive experiences, social connections, a sense of belonging, a curated artistic, a cultural experience. Positive well-being for our communities. So we're really going back to that and core and trying to figure out how best to deliver and implement and showcase that, as you have done so well.
Thanks, Justyna. Good question here from Alona Reid about transportation. And so this is really, the nitty-gritty of, businesses interacting with festivals and events. Is there a way we can be advised when events are booked? So for being a chauffeur service, we'd like to know how it would go about letting them know we're available to them. So I think, Alona, it's a great question. More broadly, those tourism businesses that work and leverage the festivals and events across our state, when there's so much uncertainty and everyone's addressing things day by day, week by week, it's really important that transport operators, accommodation operators, other operators are there supporting these festivals and events, and vice versa. What's your views there, Justyna? It's a really tough one, I know. What's the best way to have that connectivity so that the customer can be looked after and we can make sure that they stay and do as much as possible with their visit for a festival and event?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for that question. So we rely on the SATC events calendar and feed directly into that calendar, so that not only our arts and cultural events, but also all of them are captured in one centralized place. Now, if there are any gaps in how that communication or information is being transmitted and passed along to various providers, it would be really helpful if those gaps are identified. And always feel free to get in touch with me so that we can improve on those gaps. But I would say the sort of first place that I would look to in terms of when events are booked for would be the SATC events and festivals calendar, which is a centralized resource of everything that is going on and everything that they collect.
Thank you. Now I'll open it up to the floor. Please, we've got time probably for a few questions. If you've got a question, please come off mute and ask your question. Caroline Densley has posted a question online, and I'll just read it out. Following up from Alona's question, how can we better package events, festivals with trade distribution? So that's about, packaging up, a trip to South Australia to engage in a bunch of festivals and events with accommodation, with transport, with food and beverage options, things like that. Obviously, that's quite challenging in this environment. Justyna, and obviously that involves a commission structure and things like that. Do you have a view on that question from Caroline?
Well, Sean, you answered it in part by saying, we need to do better in terms of building commissionable product in that space. And this is why I think cultural tourism strategy could be really helpful in identifying the gaps where we don't necessarily have our muscles flexed so well yet, and then take a really tactical approach to building that capacity. So to Caroline's question, I think this is a real true area of opportunity that we are missing out on because we haven't necessarily taken a tactical approach to it yet, and helped to systematize and facilitate this process for businesses that this might not be kind of a natural or a component of. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area.
No, thanks, Justyna. I know it's a focus for you, and Caroline, I saw the clapping hands, so I think you'll appreciate the answer. Emma Knights has posted a question. How do small art tourism businesses get involved in making these strategic plans or being involved in these strategic plans? Obviously, there's an aspiration to have a cultural tourism plan across the state. Are you able to provide any information around how small art businesses can get involved in the planning work that's going on, Justyna?
Well, Emma, thanks so much for that question. I think first we need to galvanize momentum around the fact that this is not something that we feel we just intuitively need, but that we actually advocate for. And then we do need as broad cross section of arts businesses to be involved. I think a key component of it is to be as proactively engaged with entities like TICSA so that we can drive that conversation, but also through other sort of channels, so that we can really position this as a need for the arts tourism sector, so that interface begins to get the appropriate attention. And I spoke to the value of cultural tourism prior. It should be a no-brainer, but I think we have some work to do yet. And specifically because there are so many benefits that small to medium arts businesses and other businesses more broadly could really partake in. But I think we need to go through very thorough consultation process on what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, what are the gaps in the space, and get people involved.
No, that's great, Justyna. One last opportunity. Anyone want to come off mic and ask a question? Please do so now.
Hello there.
Elena, please go.
Hi, Sean and Justyna. How are you? Just to elaborate more on my question, in particular, because I guess we seem to be the in-between person when it comes to the tourist or local travelling from point A to point B. We're finding that for the minute at least, the winery tours and the regions out there seem to have gain the most interest, and also the regional areas with regards to holidaying and out to the caravan parks and things like that. So we're trying to find a way that we can incorporate all of these members in some way, taking them and showcasing their wares, whether it's the boutique breweries or the different locations that people may be interested in. So finding a way of how we can incorporate these people as part of our offering, I guess, is something that we're quite keen to find out. And looking at the website, it doesn't really, well, I can't open up currently anything with industry events. So whether there's another link I can look at to be able to do something like that.
I will make sure to pass that along in that case, so that you have access to that calendar that I mentioned, so that it's easier. It wouldn't be through our website; it would be through the SATC website. But I'll make sure to locate it for you and get that.
That would be good. Thank you.
Sure.
Another question from Benjamin, who's actually doing a industry placement with us at the moment. It's a great question, and I know that there's a lot of students who get involved with all of our festivals and events, and they contribute. Not only do they get great learnings, but they also contribute a lot of hours to help make these festivals and events possible. Justyna, do you have any comments? It's related to the earlier question, but any comments on how those students that are really passionate and active can get involved and contribute to some of the thinking as well?
I think that's a terrific question, and a really key element of our thinking about the ways forward as well. Some of you may know that we began together in partnership with UniSA and Flinders University, a festivals major. We're really keen to develop the educational pipeline to ensure that we are supporting students in learning the things that they need so that they are ready for careers in the sector. And look, I tend to take a very democratic approach when it comes to strategic planning. So if there were cultural tourism strategic plans out there, I would hope that they would cast the net as widely as possible so that we can get the most input and thinking about this topic as possible.
Great. One last question. Over to you, Paul. I'll let you fire away with the last question.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, look, it's just more, it's something that Justyna and I guess Sean as well would be interested to know what your views are about. What I'm wanting to ask about is scale and ambition, and whether we should be looking for leadership that actually helps us anticipate lesser participation in our festivals and our events, as just a matter of course, and that we are, instead of moving forward next year and thinking we're going to try and do it differently but have exactly the same results. Whether this is anything in your thinking, whether you've actually had any thoughts about this, and Sean also, whether the likes of SATC, I know you're not representing SATC, but you're in that stratosphere, whether we can see that kind of understanding that we're not going to reach the scale, and we can still be ambitious, but we're not going to reach scale that we've had in the past, and it's just got to be accepted that we will have lesser results, but maybe they'll be better quality. We don't know.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, it comes without saying that it will be impossible to reach the level of impact, most likely, that we have in the past, and even to continue on the trajectory of growth that we have, which has been, as I showed in that slide, fairly consistent year to year in terms of those numbers. So it is certainly an element of our planning. There are contingency plans upon contingency plans in terms of the festivals, and many different scenarios at play. We hope as many people turn up as possible. we hope that state borders are open so that we can welcome more visitors from interstate and attract them because of the pent-up demand. But we will just have to see. But the planning is certainly in place to accommodate for the various scenarios. As I mentioned, entertainment expenditure might also be quite discretionary. It could be different audience sentiment. We could have another outbreak. There's so much, so many moving parts that certainly this is an element of that thinking that we have to take into account.
No, and I fully support what Justyna's talked about there, Paul. I think, and Justyna's got in her presentation, is that there's it's an extremely challenging time, but there's also a huge amount of opportunity at the moment. And you've taken the opportunity to refocus back to core principles for your event. I think we're seeing the government, both state, federal and local government, investing a lot of money in destination development type programs, which if we get right, will deliver fantastic outcomes in the medium to long term. The short term is challenging, but there are still lots of opportunities. That's how I would answer that question. We're just about on time, so I'll now bring today's session to a close. Justyna, do you have any final points that you would like to re-emphasize?
Well, just that I'm always available for a chat and eager to hear, where the opportunities and challenges are for the broader industry, not only in the city of Adelaide, but also in the region. So always feel free to reach out. It's a really key priority of mine to maintain the conversation. So please be part of it with me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Justyna, for your generosity, your time and your strategic insights. It's absolutely brilliant in terms of what you're bringing to the table, and your engagement with the broader tourism industry has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you to all of you for attending today's session. We'll send out an email afterwards and include the recording. I encourage you to continue the conversation. Justyna's made herself available and her contact details are on her PowerPoint presentation. So thank you again all, and we look forward to seeing you in our next In Conversation webinar in a fortnight's time. Thanks again. Have a great day.